As they went on their way, he entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks, so she came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Then tell her to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her."
A few weeks ago, many of you saw some super cute pictures of me and my kids running a lemonade stand. All of us smiling, laughing, sometimes even lounging in a kiddie pool. What you didn't see were pictures of me and all the months before this, frowning, sighing, telling my kids each time they asked, "No, we're not making a lemonade stand." You see, as the annoying little show-off that lives somewhere inside of me hopes you've noticed, I'm a very busy pastor with very important things to do. I don't have time to be some two-bit lemonade stand manager. And yet, that day, when my kids finally got their way, the most beautiful thing happened. I left my planner and my laptop inside. I walked out to that lemonade stand. I sat down in that kiddie pool, and I waited for customers. And as I waited, life slowed down. And after life had slowed down, customers started trickling in. Actual customers, including a lot of you. I mean, you all must really love lemonade, or really love my kids, or have been looking for an excuse to get out of work that day because so many of you came. And so, after I finished swallowing my pride, you see, I told my kids nobody would come into our cul-de-sac for a lemonade stand. Just tell that now to the $60 they made. After I finished swallowing my pride, I got up out of that kiddie pool and I enjoyed some lemonade. In fact, more than that, I enjoyed it with my neighbors and with so many of you. Because, like I said, one after another, folks actually came. We got to meet a neighborhood kid we've never met before. We got to give our postal worker a complimentary cup for all the hard work he's done for us, especially in the last year and a half. We got to give lemonade to the guy who had helped put new grass seed in our backyard. We met some people who just moved in across the street. We got a chance to catch up with a young neighbor who was going through a kind of complex move. We got an invite from neighbors to their family-friendly 4th of July party. We got to see some of you meet Sophie Lou for the first time. We got to see that smile of Joan Warren's, the one that just when you think it can't shine any brighter, suddenly goes full supernova mode when she spots a child. The kids got a new book from Mark and Judy. We got to be John and Lisa's lunch break. And we got to see Phil somehow become our regular, even though we're only open for 2 days. It wasn't a church meeting. It wasn't the church work day. It wasn't some neighborhood outreach program. It wasn't any of those things. It was a lemonade stand. We stood there. We laughed awkwardly as my kids with their dirty hands tried to give you ice with their fingers, tried to get an extra raspberry for you out of the jar. We simply spent some time catching up, and we drank some lemonade. It was an experience, quite frankly, that reminded me of what I hope your next month will be like while I'm gone. Hoping, as I am, that your next month will be full of reconnecting with one another, full of refreshment, full of catching up. For the next month, as you continue to ease back into in-person church, as you get to do things without your nosy pastor watching, as you just enjoy being together before things get a little busier again in fall, I hope that coming to church will feel a little like pulling up to your neighborhood lemonade stand. Now, when Jesus visited Mary and Martha, the Bible doesn't specify whether they were gathered at a lemonade stand, but it's still a story that came to mind for me when I was thinking about that experience. Now, to be clear, I know that the Mary and Martha story has sometimes been a discouraging one for some of us. For a while now, I've heard some, most often from women in particular, that the story has sometimes made them feel guilty, as if they shouldn't ever get stressed out about household work. Of course, we know that men can and should do that work too, but, well, guess who, even in me and Shanda's ultra-postmodern feminist relationship, guess who in our marriage made all the lemonade, got out all the cups, napkins, and other necessary supplies, set the table up outside, put the tablecloth on it, put everything up, put it all together, and decorated it in the end. Now guess which one of us stood in front of it and took all the credit when you showed up. So, my point is that I think this story has often been a burden for many women because they already bear too much of the social pressure to be the hosts. And then we throw this story around kind of casually and seem to imply that they should feel guilty if that ever feels stressful or takes a lot out of them. But given how much the church's warmth and hospitality for others has relied on the kind of work we assume Martha was doing, and for the record, we don't know what her many tasks were. She could have been doing her and Mary's taxes for all we know. But based on what we have usually assumed those tasks were, I think it really is a shame that this intriguing little story has sometimes felt discouraged to some of our warmest, most dedicated, most hospitable people. Because I think if we're going to assume that Martha was busy with the work of showing hospitality, well, then I think that we should instead echo the third verse of our new hymn, There Is a Line of Women, number 546 in our new hymnal, which invites us to sing a song of Martha who gave Jesus food and space. And we should, as we find in the first verse of our new hymn, bless the arms that comfort, number 527 in our new hymnal, bless the hands that labor, Martha's daily deeds, Mary's precious ointment, balm for different needs. Because actually, if I think of anyone that I know who needed that story recently, it was me. And it wasn't because I was doing too much housework. You see, for me, the story of Mary and Martha does not seem very life-giving to me or Shanda if its point is that I should correct her if she ever observes that I'm not pulling my weight around the home. As tempting as it now might be to say, Shanda, how dare you? I'm a pastor now. I'm sitting at Jesus' feet. No. The much bigger and more important truth this story shows me is that what's most important isn't my many tasks. Whatever they are, it's my relationships. It's how much warmth and hospitality I can extend to others. It reminds me that in the world we live in today, it is so very tempting, even for a pastor, to believe that I exist only to get as much done as possible. And it reminds me that still today, Jesus says, actually, that's not what you were created for. You were created to be in relationship. You were created to give and receive hospitality. You were created to give and receive love. Is that a lesson that we as church families sometimes need to be reminded of too? In a world that tries to measure our success by our weekly giving, the size of our youth group, the newness of our building, how many outreach programs we run, is that something that we sometimes need to be reminded of? In a world that increasingly suggests that churches can only be successful if they're run more like businesses, in a world that convinces us that if we really love an institution, including the church, we should serve it by getting as many things done for it as possible. That's something we sometimes need to be reminded of. You see, it's all too tempting to measure our church family by the world's standards. It's all too tempting to bring back to our church family the standards that many of us are fed every day at work. It's all too tempting to come to church worship services and to committee meetings and congregational meetings and to put our to-do lists ahead of our relationships. It's all too tempting to focus on our many tasks rather than our hospitality. Now, to be clear, our Christian faith as a whole doesn't say to just sit around and never get anything done. But it teaches us that our business should be to live well in an economy of sharing and hospitality, not to chase success in our world's economy of profit and efficiency. In other words, there are many good things we can do in and for our church. There may be even sometimes some pretty long to-do lists of things that are important for us to get done. But our work must always be to facilitate the kind of connection that Mary and Jesus exemplify in this story. Our work should not, as is all too tempting, instead take the place of focusing on relationship. You see, that day I was given one more chance to become my kid's lemonade stand manager. Would have been all too easy. Would have sounded justifiable even for me to say, kids, I have too much work to do for Jesus to spend my time doing that. But by the grace of God, I ended up doing it anyway. And before you knew it, I was reminded that there is much for me to do for my church family, and it is good for me to do it. But my business is not first and foremost to do all the things. It is for me to do those things if and because they help us to foster, maintain, and be in relationship. And it's when I succeed at doing that, it's when we as a church family succeed at doing that, that we free ourselves from the economy of the world, which tells us that we're only worth as much as what we've last achieved. And instead, we deepen our roots in the economy of God, where we are already made in the image of the Creator, where before we even did a single thing, God called us very good, where we're so precious that God will leave the 99, if need be, just to find each of us, and where none of this depends on what we've achieved lately, and where all we're asked to do is to take the gifts that God has given each of us and share them, so that we might offer friendship and hospitality to one another. Friends, when fall comes, I don't want to scare you, but just a month from now, really, when fall comes, our reopened church is inevitably going to hit a bit of a higher gear. We're going to have more than enough on our church to-do lists again. Much of it will be very good work that helps us to share our gifts and to offer hospitality to one another and beyond. Because we live in a world that worships at the altar of profit and efficiency, it's going to be tempting to get caught in that rat race here. To try to complete everything on those to-do lists as quickly as possible so that we can be successful by the world's standards, so that we can establish our efficiency and impress with our accomplishments. This August, we try to set ourselves up not for success as the world knows it, but for living in God's economy of hospitality and sharing. This August, we can remind ourselves of what God says about us. We can remind ourselves that God calls us to live life for relationships. So that when things get different again, we remember who we're called to be, which ultimately can be what helps us to decide what really needs to be making about that. How quickly it all really needs to be done. What should really take priority, and most importantly, what's hearing. Join us in immersing yourself in this summer worship we have planned.
and all. During the message portion of the service, each Sunday you're going to hear from a different member of our church family. They'll tell you something about what their life has been like for the last 16 months, and they'll tell you about how that has been part of their walk. I invite you to simply soak it in, talk to them about it later, and also just simply enjoy being and talking together again.
Inside and outside this sanctuary. To put it in a more playful way, this August, I invite you to come to church like you're going to your neighborhood lemonade stand. To come, slow down, catch up, and just to appreciate one another's hospitality and poured out gifts. And then, when things inevitably get busy again in fall, hopefully we'll all be a little bit more likely to remember what this is all about.